The hospital, January 2014. Sitting in the hospital, people are passing by, stressing, people in white coats with something in their hand, stressing from one room to another. You have these white, famous walls, and I'm sitting there on a chair, holding a folder, confirming that I might not ever be able to walk properly again, or that I will never do sports again. And even more importantly for me, that I had probably lost my entire identity. I was this sports guy, and suddenly I was told that that would never happen again. And I was sitting in Singapore, alone as well, early in the morning. So I was not very happy of being in the hospital this time, like most people aren't when they're in the hospital unless you work there. The big question is, how did I end up here with the message of maybe not walking properly again? I grew up in the countryside in Norway, and being different is not normally something very popular. I see there's potentially people here from different countries as well, so I assume that it's similar in many countries. Most of the countries I've been to, it's quite the same. And I guess someone is wondering what happened to the blonde hair. Don't really know, to be fair. We have to ask my mom about that. And growing up, when you're different, you're very easily singled out by other kids and by the people around you. And then bullying comes very natural after that. And in my case, I was not necessarily different because I looked so different. I was different because I was thinking in a different way. And as I've had friends that were talking about that they remember that when they were kids, they wish they could wash their skin to look white, I imagined that I could wash my brain to be like everyone else. And in the same way that you can't wash your skin, you can't wash who you are at one point. So slowly I got beautiful nicknames as gay because I was talking about feelings and I was reflecting in a different way. I was a little bit chubby, so then I got fat. And then I was good in school, and then I got nerd, and now suddenly you have a beautiful mix of something that is going to stick with you for a while. And the challenge of being bullied when you're young and being in it is, of course, that at one point it's just normal. So I vividly remember thinking that life is probably just shit until you get an adult, right? Because seemingly the adults around me seem to have it a little bit better. So this carried on into my teenage years, and then something happens that happens to all of us. And that is sometimes you get a curveball from life. Something you can't prepare for, something that has nothing to do with you. So in this loneliness that I was growing up, not really having anyone to talk to, I ended up back into a tree. There's a lot of trees where I come from. I come from the countryside, so that wasn't so difficult to find. And this time, I wasn't sitting in the tree to think about life or to enjoy the view, which I have been doing a lot in my life. This time, I was sitting there thinking about how to end my life, not if I was supposed to end my life. And the curveball that I had received was that my mom, one of the few people that actually saw me for who I was, had gotten cancer introduced into her life. And even though, touch wood, my mom is still alive, we didn't know that at the time. And she was, of course, scared, and she couldn't fully deal with it in the beginning, so she didn't then give me the attention and support that I was used to. And suddenly I was all alone. I didn't even have that one person. And then for me, seemingly I was just a burden for everybody. And I remember sitting in the tree thinking about how to do it, because you're 13, so you don't really have that much references. So at one point, I got scared of failing. I got scared of, for example, trying to jump from somewhere that's not tall enough and then break my legs or break my spine and end up in a wheelchair because I was an idiot. And then having life looking at me for the rest of my life saying, "You worthless piece of shit, couldn't even kill yourself." And that's exactly how I felt when I was sitting in that tree. And luckily for me, there is no tall buildings. And I said I was a nerd. So I got to the point that I figured out how high I would have to jump to be 100% sure to succeed, right? And then I was okay, where can I find these buildings? Oslo. That was my answer. So I was very happy with myself. I climbed down from the tree, and then that gave me 1 week. Because the thing that was annoying everyone else in the countryside, that it takes 2 hours to get to Oslo, was my life buoy in one sense, because then it took me a week to actually find the right time to go. And then my grandmother was able to ask me the right question. In this feeling lost, she actually asked me, how do you feel? She was one of the few that actually saw me in the midst of this chaos around my mom, of course. And then things loosened up. And now I found the thing that actually saved me in this. And that was sports. Because there's one place where no one cares who you are. And that's on the sports field. You're only judged on your performance. So if you score 4 goals in a 5-1 win, no one is going to like, do we really like this guy? Do we like him? No, not sure. Let's bully him instead. No, obviously. So here you're okay. So I filled my entire life with sports. And luckily for me, I have ADHD. I have a deep motivation for being good because this was the one place I was not bullied. Plus on top of that, when I was born, there wasn't 2 people waiting for me. There was 1. And my dad wasn't there. He didn't want anything to do with me. So my entire life I had been doing things to seek attention. And obviously that's also quite a good motivator as well. Not necessarily the right one, but at one point I became very good at sports. And my identity closer and closer linked to that. And there's a lot of things that other people complain about for the countryside that was positive for me. And another thing is that the closest athletes college is 2 hours away. Then in Drammen, 2 hours away with the bus. So I was probably the happiest kid on the planet that was 4 hours traveling every single day back and forth because there was no one else from the countryside going to that school. So again, I could start all over. It was a fresh start. And in my class, it was a B point average just to get in. So you can't be bullying for being a nerd. Everyone was a nerd in my class. And of course, everyone loved sports. You can't be bullied for that either. So now I'm just left with being the weird one. And at this point, I could deal really well with that. So I finished athletes college. My life was a lot better, but I was still the different one. And I ended up, of course, in the army, like we have to back in the day. It was mandatory. And I went into the special forces because of athletes college. And suddenly, I found myself being in a position of not really knowing what to do. Because I broke my ankle. So life threw me another curveball. I was lost again. And I asked myself the very common question, what now? And I had a friend who was studying shipping. And I have ADHD, like I said, so reading books is not really my strong side, even though I'm good in school. So then I said to myself, okay, if I read this horrible big book, that's the main one for that course of shipping, and I like it, then I'll go there. And that's what I did. And I loved the book. And I went into that school more motivated than ever. I thought I'd found my path again. And then after just 1 year in school, from someone coming from the countryside and from a working class family in Norway, I was suddenly hired by what was then one of the most popular companies on the planet at the age of 21. And I was like, what is going on? And I remember the guy asking me, like, are you ready to start this job after like 5 rounds of interviews and stuff? And I remember thinking in my head, no, but I said yes, obviously. Yes, I'm super ready. I'm very psyched. I think I will deal with this. 9 years younger than the next one in the company. So I was definitely not ready for this. And again, I was the different one, and I felt very lost in this place. But luckily for me as well, of course, I love learning new things, so very quickly and slowly I got into it. And they took well care of me as well. So all was good again. 6.5 years in, I was in Singapore. Again, super focused on getting attention because my dad still hadn't reached out and said, hey, son, I'm proud of you. So I was still doing everything for the attention. The more difficult, the better to get this attention from this guy. And then, of course, I'm in Singapore, I'm young, I'm given another opportunity for the same company, big position, and now I'm really, really psyched to perform. I come back from Christmas break in the first tough 6 months adapting to a new culture, and then 2 days into that, bang, in a football game that I was still playing at the semi-professional level, I shatter a vertebrae disc in my spine, and I lose most of the nerves in my right leg. And then for the first time in my life, I have to stop and truly ask myself the question, who are you really? And what are you good at? What do you want in life? Because I had no idea. I was doing so many things. One of the advantages and disadvantages of ADHD. I was a top-level coach. I was a mentor. I traveled 1 month each year to some country around the world doing humanitarian work. And I was working for the capitalistical cave of Norway, Mr. Fredriksen as well. Very different things. So I wasn't sure. And then, broken dreams, like we said, what did that create? That creates lessons. And the lesson that I learned from all of this, of course, was that I need to change. This is not what I want. I can't continue doing choices for a person that I haven't seen in 12 years. And I'm still blaming the guy for my decisions. How is that possible? It's not even in my life. So now it's time to do things for me. And that's exactly what I did. So then, we're moving into mental health. Because it wasn't the physical aspect of being injured that was my toughest challenge. My toughest challenge was that my identity was lost. I didn't know what to do. The physical side I knew how to recover, but the mental side I had no idea. What now? And then I started looking into the mental health stats around the world and started realizing other steps in my life as well that integrated with mental health. So as we know, around 50% of us are at all times suffering with mental health, a challenge. And now it's also rising to the biggest factor for low quality of life and absence from work. The biggest factor, not just a big factor, the biggest factor. More importantly in this sense, all the other challenges that we have for the SDGs, they are going to die with the young generation. Old people don't care about the environment. Old people don't care about equality and all these things. At least that's what we say. And mental health is much worse among the young generation. And it's rising uncontrollably. So we have no idea what's going to happen. And that's why WHO was striking the alarm bells earlier this year as well. And that's also something I have obviously a very close relationship to, being in the bottom of that scale, thinking to actually end my life and planning to when I was only 13. And when we really look into that, why is it still like that? Because we didn't start focusing on this yesterday, obviously. So if 1.1 billion people are suffering at this very moment today, why is only 20 to 40% seeking help of the people who actually have a challenge? Not of all of them, but the ones struggling. So then I realized we don't talk about our problems at all, especially if you're a man. And I was bullied for being feminine when I was young, so I was definitely not going to do that, because I was, of course, then trying to be as stereotypical as I could, even though I wasn't able. It was one of the few things that I really didn't succeed with in life. So it was still the strange one. That took me to, what do we do, human beings, when we're very lost? What's the main reason why Bali is a big success? It's because we go from the stressful life we have to the completely opposite. And then we go back home and we say, this is the magical recipe. I'm all better now. Now I'm thinking in my head, yeah, if you're not better by living there, just breathing beautiful air, having no stress around you, leaving your phone, then something is really wrong with you. So of course that's going to work. The big question is, what are you going to do when you come back here? If you want to move to Bali, that's great. But if you don't want, then what with the rest of the year, right? So I went to Doctors Without Borders from the capitalistical cave. The opposite, which is great in terms of learning. I went to Afghanistan, my first mission, for a full year. And again, I was there for the big bombing of Kunduz. international news. The Americans bombed our hospital, and we lost many, many, many colleagues, 43 to be accurate. One of the toughest moments in my life, in general. And again, no one talked about it. And now every single person that was there went through exactly the same, so there's no excuse. I knew that everyone was struggling with something around this. Not talking about it. What do we do with that? Because the main reason I went to Afghanistan, and the main reason many other people go somewhere, is that I was wondering what makes humans human? What on planet Earth is making us who we are? Because I really didn't understand the people around me and the choices they were doing. And then I got into 3 very interesting questions. Number 1, what has been your life's toughest challenge? Number 2, how have you dealt with it and how did you overcome that? And number 3, more importantly, what did you learn? Because that's who you are, not the way you look in the mirror, at least for me. I've traveled and worked and been to more than 50 countries in my life. And of all the people I've met around in countries that had nothing to do with Norway, I've still found people that I've truly connected with. And for example, that have often been people that maybe didn't have a male role model, or that have been people that have been missing something in trying to achieve for others, and people that have been through, for example, a deep traumatic depression from bullying and self-image. And suddenly we've had a very deep connection, even though nothing else around us makes us similar. That's when we got into making the human aspect. Because imagine if we actually had a place where we could go and learn from other people that was there before us. That was the one thing I really wished I had in Singapore. Someone to ask questions, someone to learn from, because I had never been in this situation, and no one in my family had either. So there was no one to ask. And the surgeon, he could say, yeah, do this, do that. The physio could say, do this, do that. I was a former athlete. I had no problem with that. But what about what goes on in here? He didn't know that. He hadn't been there. Most surgeons and doctors and physios haven't gone through all the injuries in the world just to test it out, right? So that we need to learn from someone else. So when you have ADHD, instead of talking about things, you do things. So then I went into just making it. So instead of talking about it, let's look a little bit on a trailer that shares a little bit of the last 3 years. Do you feel alone? Or that no one understands you? Or do you feel your struggle is too small to share? So did we. But out there, we found people who understand you.
My life's toughest challenge has been between being myself and being who everybody else wanted me to be.
It has been dealing with disappointment and not feeling like I achieved what I wanted to achieve.
That I've felt the same or been in the same situation as you.
The pressure I put on myself to save the world.
We found out that my son at 13 was diagnosed with cancer.
Being born as an orphan in extreme poverty.
But they have managed to find a way out of it.
I just started from a point and it went from that point smoothly. I just had to start.
Friends, family, support, and facing my fear head on. I think that's what it was.
Because hundreds of people from more than 75 countries have shared their toughest moments in life and been vulnerable so that you can connect. Imagine if you could access a person who could share that with you from anywhere in the world at any time you needed it. Now you can.
What I've learned during all these years is that you are responsible for your life.
Det jeg tenker om meg selv, det er det som egentlig spiller en rolle. I learned to trust people.
Because hundreds of people from more than 75 countries have shared their toughest moment in life. They have shared how they managed to find a solution and create a new normal for themselves. In the world's first digital life experience library, the human aspect. So, what are you waiting for? All that's left is for you to explore thehumanaspect.com and find the stories you connect with. So, what do you think about the beautiful video? That's good, right? Yeah? How being lost in life can actually be where you find and learn what your passion is. One of the biggest questions for humans is obviously, of course, how does passion look? Our passion. Where do we find it? Okay, so how do we turn lost to found? Just a gimmick, could have been from Deloitte or KPMG. Took a lot to think about that. So, next point. Out of the 500 people that I've interviewed over the last 3 years, and this Life Experience Library, which is the first in the world, was designed together with the Norwegian design agency that took it upon themselves as a pro bono project to do this. So it took just 3 months from the idea until it was up. Now, today, we have people using this library in every single country in the world, except 2, Cuba and North Korea. And I've been to North Korea, so I know why it's not working there. They have no internet. So I will bring a USB just to make sure that we can tick off that as well. And then if someone is going to Cuba, let me know. I'll give you a USB. And then we have all the countries in the world. And very fascinating is that out of the almost 500 people that I've interviewed, only 3% have ever asked themselves the question, what did I learn from my toughest challenge? Because the second we're out of a challenge, we throw it into a chest, we push it under the table, and then we run away from it. We're so happy we're out of our challenge, right? We run away. Never talk about it again. This is tough things. We don't talk about that. But then you're leaving behind the one thing that could have actually made the whole thing worth it. The lesson. There's something to learn here. So, the answer to what is your core motivation lies in your own story. Because what is also fascinating with these interviews, they are doing this to help other people. Because of course they're sharing their journey. Number one, they're sharing the toughest challenge they've ever faced, but really in detail, in ways that most people have never heard before, unless you are a psychologist. So, for someone sitting in the tree like I was doing, or for someone else struggling with something else, because we have everything from love sickness to like deep depression, you will get confirmation of the one most dangerous truth, and that is that you feel that you're alone. There's 7 billion people on this planet, and still you believe you're the only one that goes through this. I did, and I know most other people do as well. It's quite fascinating, considering that probably even statistically, someone at your workplace or even someone in your class or someone around you is probably going through exactly the same. You're just not talking about it. So, if you dare to ask yourself those tough questions, which I did when I was 27 and I was forced to do it, then you might actually find out what is your core motivation. So my core motivation up to 27 was getting recognition from my biological father. Even though I had a fantastic stepfather, I had a good family, I was not missing anything in terms of love, but still, subconsciously, I was driven by this strange factor, this man that I hadn't talked to in 12 years. So, I called the guy. Interesting, when you haven't talking to him in 12 years. So I called him and said, hey, it's Jimmy Rubin. And he was like, Jimmy Rubin who? Statistically, it's only one in the world, so it's a weird question to get. So I was like, your son. I was like, oh, quite silent after that. And then, of course, I then told him that I forgive him for the things that he's done. He's an alcoholic. He was in my life for 10 years almost, and a lot of bad things happened. And I told him that I truly forgive you for what you have done to me. And then the next 20 minutes, I told him about the last 12 years of my life. It's also a strange conversation. But after that, I realized one of my biggest lessons, which was that forgiveness isn't for him, it's for me. Because I was not forgiving him because he didn't deserve it. And he still don't. But forgiveness was never for him, it was for me. So that I can move forward. So now I have the same driving force that took me to where I was when I was 27. I would have never been there if it wasn't for my dad. We're talking a lot about this now. Norwegians are underperforming because they don't really need to perform. The worst thing that can happen to you is going to the NAV system, and that's fairly okay, right? So we don't have that driver that, for example, second-generation immigrants do. Or first kind of generation immigrants or refugees or anyone with a deeper motivation, something that drives you. I had that. So I shouldn't blame my dad for that. I should actually thank him for that. And then I can move forward with the same force because now I know I have it. But now I can use it for my own decisions and not for subconsciously just the most difficult one, because that's not always the right choice. So, next point. Now we have a slide. At least it's not supposed to be faded, but that's okay. You can read it, I hope. Empowering your story to fuel your passion, because if you learn what motivates you, you can also then find out what you're good at, and if you find out what you're actually good at, you find your passion. It's actually as simple as that. So most of you are sitting here, you're here because you're creative as well, I understand, within the creative realm. So you probably, along your life, have known that you have a passion for this, the creative profession, creating something. Like I said, the human aspect was created thanks to people like yourself, because I didn't have that skill set. I had the skill set of getting people to open up about the toughest challenge they've ever had to someone they'd never met. Having a conversation, for example, as a man with a woman that have been abused or raped is very difficult. But I have that ability. So that's what I'm doing what I'm doing. That's what I'm creating it. That's why I have a passion for it, because I can help that person to tell their story in a way that can help all the other people out there that have gone through this and help them to potentially get out of it. What you once thought was lost was you just blinking. Because in my life, again, beautiful gimmick from Deloitte, but the point is, when you think you're lost, you're actually very close to the next breakthrough, or in the sense, the next top. So again, all the things that we say around that, because now the last 3 years being a full-time entrepreneur, which is very difficult obviously, some of the toughest moments I've had when I've literally been on the floor of my office, lying there, crying, just thinking like, what am I doing? Why am I here? Why am I not just having an ordinary job? This feels useless. And then I just allow all those feelings to come. And then just after that, I have gotten one of the more inspiring moments in the human aspect and gotten some of the ideas that now really carry the project. And today, like we said, we're all over the world. We are now one of the very, very few that actually have a partnership as well with Facebook, supporting us to actually reach people with mental health challenges. Because sadly, social media, of course, is where a lot of the trouble happens. So if we can replace the content that creates the trouble with content that can actually get people out of the trouble, then Facebook can be the solution instead of the problem. So, when you feel lost, or when you have felt lost, go curiously into that and figure out why were you there? What did you feel? What happened? And what can you learn from that? What ability did you take out from that to get out of it? Because that's the ability that probably lies within you to be the most important thing. On my arm, a little bit here and there, it says, life isn't about finding yourself, life is about creating yourself. What do I mean by that? Again, it's because if we always run around in life believing that we're going to find something, when you're born yourself, we're asking ourselves the wrong question. The big question is, who do you want to be? And why is what happened to you important for that? And it doesn't matter if you have a troubled past or if you have a simple past, because you have the past you have. But there's something in that that can actually, if you decide to honestly, like carrying it with you, you don't have to share it from a stage or on Facebook or around you, but at least for yourself, accept what happened and accept that this is an important part of who you are now. Because that's what happens when we feel lost. Like we said, we feel alone, we feel like no one understands us. And for creative people as well, this is normally when the most creative phase will start after that. If you actually then dare to feel it and say, this happened, now what? And then moving out from that. Now we're actually in the end. Dare to ask yourself the tough questions. And I say dare because this is really difficult. I had a big talk for only men. And a lot of men say that sharing emotions is weak, right? It's kind of a myth. It's weak to share emotions. It's weak to cry. There was even an NRK documentary about this now, where they were kind of almost making fun of men that didn't know when they cried last. And then normally the answer was like a football game or something silly like that. And then I was at this conference and I asked them, it's like 400 men in the room, tough men, and I said, okay, so last time that you shared emotions, was that easy? Do you do it often? Do you prefer it? No. The easy thing to do is to keep it inside and move forward and pretend like nothing happened. That is the weak thing to do. The strong thing to do, that women do all the time, is to dare to share and dare to be vulnerable. And then do something about it and move out from that. So suddenly all those men were sitting very quietly in the stage. And then when they came off after, that's the thing they remembered. They were like, I actually didn't think of that. That's actually the tough thing to do, if you have to use tough or weak as a word even at all. And then, of course, you had some people that was emotional after that, and then you have the cool men that goes up to you, and they're probably from like 20-meter distance, and they do like this, and they look at you, and they do like that. And they move out. It's like, I touched someone now, that's great. So, dare to ask yourself those tough questions, because, and then you can normally turn lost to being found. So normally, it's actually as simple as asking yourself a tough question. And then taking it from there, being creative, do post-its. What did I learn? Put it on the wall, right? Write a journal. Talk to yourself in the mirror. Or even record a post or video on your phone and then look at it. It's quite fascinating what happens when you do that. Or be even more daring and do it with someone that knows you. And ask the tough questions to them and have them ask tough questions to you. Like you, for example, can do now. So, I think now it's supposed to say thank you very much. Very cute picture of me. Then, of course, the social media details of hashtag the human aspect. We are everywhere and nowhere. And, of course, me, Jimmy Westerheim as well. And the last thing is, because Clear Channel, do you know who that is? Yes, people who have commercial out there. The one on the subway and in like halls and malls and everywhere. They have put out a competition that an NGO that can help people in Norway can win up to 1.8 million of then kind of press or commercial around the world. But the competition is for creative people. So the creative people who want to win that competition and get their name on a campaign can then help an organization like ourselves to help people to get out of their challenges. So if anyone here is feeling creative and that want to be part of that competition, please reach out, because we really need your help from someone who knows how to present, for example, our project or any other project for that matter. If you have another cause that you think is important, check out Clear Channel or reach out to us. Thank you very much.